welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review the show. Reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel, airing live on Sportsnet 360, Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. I'm your host, William Liu, and for the first half of the show, I am joined on the line by Coach David Thorpe of True Hoop. Coach, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. And Coach, as we bring you on every single time, we're gonna talk about two subjects. I think listeners to the show already know what we're gonna talk about. And we'll start with Pascal, who obviously is having a phenomenal season. Obviously, I saw the first returns for the All-Star voting and stuff like that. Look, listen, I don't think Pascal was going to win a popularity contest, especially with the season not going necessarily the way people want in Toronto. However, I think we can all agree that he is going to make this All-Star team. He's very deserving, even though the competition in the East is very, very strong in terms of forwards and in the All-Star sort of consideration. But Pascal's got to be on the All-Star team. Can we at least start there?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. I've not spoken to a single knowledgeable or expert person in the NBA that doesn't think he's a definite All-Star. So honestly, I can't imagine a scenario where he would make the All-Star team. I mean, he's up for All NBA. We're 41 games to go on that, but he's in the running. So All-Star should be a cinch.
Yeah. And really the only thing that you would say that isn't in his favor right now is just the Raptors being a losing record right now. But we all know that really has very little to do with what Pascal's been doing. In fact, I sometimes I wonder if Pascal wasn't here, how this team or this franchise would fare. So, Coach, I was listening to True Hoop, one of my top podcasts of the year, and the episode you guys did, the last one of 2022. You and Gerard were talking about Pascal Siakam after he dropped 52 at MSG, and the quote that you said kind of really struck me was that you said that you kind of got to cross paths with Pascal over the summer, and then you said to him that you didn't realize that you were Kevin Durant because you didn't grow up in America. And I thought that was like, wow, okay, first off, that is obviously a very, very complimentary thing to say. But second of all, I guess it got me thinking about his career development path. And so I wanted to sort of hear what you meant by that statement, and also sort of like how he can continue to sort of, swing upwards in his trajectory, because even though he's, 28, 29-ish, like, a lot of players sort of peak at this time, it still feels very much like Pascal still has more runway to go. Why is that?
Okay, well, I grew up in Florida, which is a football state. And so, most players early on in their athletic lives, we see the kind of athlete they look like they are going to be, or maybe already are, and they just kind of get plugged into different spots on a football field. And then back when I was first coaching in the late 80s, you would realize, okay, this guy keeps growing. Football becomes a tough sport. Pascal probably would have been an amazing wide receiver had he stopped growing at 6'4". He's so fast and fluid with amazing hands and agility and change of direction and stopping and starting. These are all very, very, very important things to do as a wide receiver, even a quarterback at 6'4", 6'5". But when I was growing up as a coach, as they kept growing, you started saying, okay, they need to specialize at basketball. And then that might be when they're 14, 15, 13. You start realizing, all right, this guy's really a talented player, and you just start projecting that path and get it. Back then it was different than it is now with AAU, but nowadays, even in Pascal's age, had he been 17 in America, he would have been seen as Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, with his intelligence. Duke recruits those kind of players. He was just going to be that kind of guy. You could just see what he was going to grow into. And I think because of that, these players develop a swagger that maybe they shouldn't even necessarily have, because maybe they haven't been so productive at that point in their career. But that swagger helps get them through the rough spots that is part of the development for any athlete. And I think in Pascal's case, because of where he grew up and how late he came to America and where he went to college, not like anyone would, probably most people don't even know where New Mexico State is in terms of what city they play their games in.
Yeah, I have no clue.
Yeah, it's just a different path for him. And I don't think he just ever realized that he's supposed to be in the running among the best players in the world. I say this about Durant all the time, and Durant's probably taller than Pascal. He's probably 7 feet tall. But what makes him super special beyond just his skill as a shooter is his as agility and athleticism and overall skill as a basketball player and feel for the game. You just don't see 7-footers move like he moves. And Pascal is the same at 6'10" or whatever he is. And as long as he is, this guy would, if you gave Pascal the same talent at 6'4" that he has at 6'10", he'd probably would have been an All-American guard anyway. Maybe, those guys don't always make the NBA, but he would have had a real shot, same as KD, because they're such freak athletes. And then I know, William, you've heard me talk about these basketball players that play speed chess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He's one of those guys that plays speed chess, and then as he's got experience, he's played more real three-dimensional chess where you're just seeing moves both instantaneously and then 3-4 moves down the way a little bit. That speed chess is the pattern recognition and quick reaction that gets them out of trouble so often, or finds open creases that another player who may look like Pascal gets himself in trouble all the time. And where they just don't process as fast. That doesn't mean they're not smart. They just don't process as fast. These guys have brilliant fast processors. And so I just think that in our country, because soccer is where it ranks where it ranks, way behind sports like football and basketball, Pascal would have been seen as the next guy, much more likely than he was coming from Cameroon.
Yeah, and one of the stories I heard there just about Pascal, especially when he played at New Mexico State, which, yeah, good point. I have no idea what city that is or where that's located, other than just in the general state. But the story I heard there was that I think only like maybe 2 NBA teams came out to actually scout him in person. And of course, he went through the whole scouting process and you go through team workouts, but we're talking about like people coming to your conference and watching your games in person. That's how sort of under the radar it is. And that's kind of why it's been so amazing watching him sort of take this step this season. If there's been one positive with the Raptors, it's been Pascal and him taking this step forward. And I almost want to look at it in the sense that, we've kind of talked this storyline about Pascal and his improvements this season. And it was almost, to me, not refreshing, but from a content perspective, it was more interesting to watch him struggle a couple of games recently where he had 2 games back to back against, Milwaukee and against New York, where he had only 4 field goals made. He had another game recently where he played Memphis, and I thought Dylan Brooks gave him a lot of trouble. And I thought it was actually interesting in terms of thinking about how he can continue to improve, looking at some of the games where he's relatively struggled, because really he's just played between like B+ to A+ in like all the other games. Those 3 in particular games, and just thinking about sort of how defenses have somehow succeeded in guarding Pascal. So like let's say you're an opposing coach and you're looking at all this film and all this kind of stuff, and you're looking at Pascal in particular. He's got to be the number 1 item you got to scout for when you're playing the Raptors. How would you stop Pascal? What are some of the remaining weaknesses or some of the ways that you can try to speed him up or at least get him in trouble?
Well, before I answer that, it's a good question that I haven't answered to. Let me first address just a real good way of looking at things. To your point about how he's had 3 games or so where he was subpar. I always say, and I've written this, that great players tend to play great. Elite players tend to play elite. Good players tend to play good. Average players tend to play average. Bad players tend to play badly. But all of them, over the course of an 82-game season, have a game or 2 or 3 in every other category. Mm-hmm. You've got the world's best players will just play badly. You go look up Steph Curry's game log if you don't believe me. It's the same for everybody. There's no such thing as always playing at the same level. You live in every category, but that tend to is what I was saying is normally if you spend most of your time as an elite player, well, you're going to be an elite player. If you spend most of your time as a good player, but you have a couple elite games, you're just a good player with a couple of great games. Great. That's not how you're defined.
Right.
And the data normally always will support that. So, yeah, no surprise at all that Pascal has a couple of bad games. Everyone does. Bad players have a lot of them. Great players have just a few. As to your question, the first thing I would do, you can't let him get comfortable. He's gotten so much better. Everyone talks about, getting to your spots. Well, most experienced players, as opposed to rookies and young players, They know their spots. They just don't always hunt them ferociously. And I think the game's best players, I don't know if you saw, William, the screenshot of the faces of the player leading the league in scoring from like every zone on the court. Have you seen
Mm.
this recently?
Yep. Yep.
So you know what I call the second box is that area in the middle of the floor from 8 feet to the 15-foot line.
Hmm.
So if you imagine that as an arc in the same exact dimensions as the 3-point line, except it's 8 to 15 feet. Do you know what player dominates every single zone in that 8 to 15-foot mark, baseline to baseline?
I mean, imagining Kevin Durant, maybe DeMar
Right.
DeRozan, that kind of
Every
player.
one of them. Kevin Durant. Yeah, DeRozan, I think, might be a little above that in one spot.
Sure.
Yeah, and at the paint is, I think, if I remember, the rim was Giannis. I think left corner was Devin Vassell. Durant is all of the spots from 8 to 15.
Yeah.
So he's lucky. He doesn't have just a spot. He has spots, plural, and he relentlessly attacks them, which is why he leads the league in scoring from every one of those zones. That's a very, very experienced professional scorer. Pascal is still learning that. Clearly, this year he's doing better than ever before at getting to those areas of which he's at his best, and then play from there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one reason why his assist numbers are up. Is you just have to send help to get there. So as a defensive player and as a defensive, a strategist, you want to disrupt his relentless hunt for his best spots. I happen to like, and you've already referenced it, as someone who gets a chance to coach a lot of players, both in season and off season, kind of privately. I would not let Pascal get a rhythm when he hunts those spots. And so if I had a very quick, strong guard, I'd sick him on the 6'10" ball handling, playmaking score. Because even though I may not be able to steal it from him, which I might get a steal or two, I can disrupt his rhythm, make him uncomfortable. Most players don't like being guarded by smaller, quicker, stronger guys. He's stronger on the floor anyway. I listened to a podcast this morning raving about Davion Mitchell from Sacramento being the kind of defensive player we all thought he could be when he came out of Baylor.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a strong, quick, an aggressive defender. Dylan Brooks is in the same mold and not as small. So those guys make it uncomfortable. You probably remember Jameer Nelson. I know you know Chris Paul, Kyle Lowry. I know you know well. Try posting those guys up.
Yeah.
They're low to the ground. They bump you off your space. If you bring the ball habitually as part of your regular routine, if you tend to drop the ball a little lower than you probably should, a lot of guys may let you do it. Those guys won't. They're going to grab it from you because they know they have no shot if you don't do that.
Right.
If you drop it, it's theirs, or at least they're going to disrupt you again. We hit the ball, get a deflection, get a jump ball. And so you got to get under Pascal's skin a little bit, like an elephant around a mouse. Make him uncomfortable. Where does he put his foot? Where does he put his dribble? I think you got to pick him up early. I'd make him think about whether or not we're really going to commit help. He doesn't, honestly, I don't think he loves to score. He likes to score. He'd rather just win. I think he'd rather just make the right play. And so if you telegraph that you're not helping and you're going to stay home on shooters, he can score in a way maybe Ricky Rubio struggled with, because that's how you had to play Ricky Rubio, is just don't let him pass the ball because he doesn't want to score. I'd make Pascal think, am I coming? Am I not coming? Where am I coming from?
Right.
I'm not sure I'd be successful in that. He's a fast processor, but at least I would try to disrupt his rhythm, his timing, and make him unsure that we're going to definitely commit to not letting him get a great shot and make him be a passer. And then sometimes actually don't let him pass, make him shoot, and he might be thinking pass. It may not work, but again, the whole idea is just kind of disrupt his thinking a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great review, and I think it's interesting you brought up Dylan Brooks. I think out of everybody who has played Pascal this season, and I've obviously watched and covered all 30 of his games, I thought Dylan Brooks did the best job at it with Memphis. Obviously, he had tons of help with Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr. just waiting at the rim. But I think Dylan Brooks did exactly what you mentioned, like got up really close, dug up almost under him in a way, made it really uncomfortable for him to face up in particular. And I feel like with Pascal this year, him facing up has been a lot stronger than before, because before he would obviously really strongly prioritize the basket, which obviously he's good at. But we've seen this season where he's able to get into that 8 to 15 foot range, the fadeaway jumpers. I thought he hit a couple of those against Portland. And, if he faces up and he's able to sort of get to one of his two spots, it's really, really easy for him to get his shot off cleanly, even if there is help defenders at the basket. They don't even matter if he's shooting, pulling up before that point. But that's where Dillon Brooks is able to really be successful. I mean, look, it's been interesting because we're talking about a guy who's now in that like really elite class, right? We're talking about him as like a guy who could make his third All-NBA team in the last 4 seasons, right? And so for players like that, it's really hard to find small gaps in their games. But I think with Pascal too, there's an interest in him continuing to want to close down those gaps and make himself even better, which is the coolest part, I think, for me. Just like when you think about like the Raptors potentially making moves at the deadline, absolutely no in no scenario do you even think about, moving Pascal. For me personally, this is the guy I want to commit the franchise to.
Are you asking me, do I think Toronto should think about pivoting off of him and maybe just going younger?
No, I really don't think so. I mean, I doubt. Is that the direction you think that they should move in? Because for me, I just wouldn't do that.
I mean, why do you tank to draft to Pascal Siakam?
Exactly.
And if you don't get Pascal Siakam, you don't get a top 4 pick. I realize where he went in the draft, but he should have gone top 5 or top 3, whatever the draft was that year.
Well, if you redrafted the class,
if you don't get that,
he's in contention for the first guy. Like it's like him, Jaylen Brown, Brandon Ingram, Ben Simmons.
But if you don't get that, well, then you're hoping to get like an OG. Well, you have an OG.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're in between 10, 11, 12, 13 and top 3, well, then you're hoping to get a Scotty. Well, you got him too. So why would you start over? Make it literally, it's a non-starter for me. They have that nucleus, and they're just gonna have to figure it out because I feel this way about Utah. Everyone is raving about what Utah did. I'm not. If indeed you knew Donovan Mitchell wasn't going to stay beyond, once his contract was up, that's different. Then I understand it to some degree, and maybe that was always the case, and I wasn't aware of that. But you see what he's doing in Cleveland. You see what we know what kind of player Rudy Gobert is. Bogdanovich in Detroit, Mike Conley's still terrific. They broke it apart, and maybe they'll draft some really good players to be as good as they were a couple years ago. I don't know. The odds aren't great. So I feel like Toronto's got what they need to build. They just got to figure it out now.
Yeah. And that's where we got to talk about the other two pieces where I truly think if Scotty was playing at his very best and if Fred was playing on his very best, this season looks entirely different for Toronto. We're having an entirely different conversation day in and day out. However, we're having these two conversations. And I think with Scotty, the trend recently, so Nick has put him back as sort of the center for the starting group. Now, obviously, he's not a traditional center in terms of he's not backing guys down and exclusively playing in the paint. He has the ball quite a bit. He's able to distribute quite a bit. But it's been interesting to me watching how opponents have responded to Scotty playing center because they obviously have centers on the floor. However, what they're doing with their centers is playing a very aggressive drop back coverage, essentially a one-man zone in the paint, allowing Scotty to do whatever he wants on the perimeter, but essentially shutting off the paint for other players. Now, my question to you, coach, is like, first off, like mentality-wise, I don't know if you ever worked with a player before where coaches have treated them in this way when they're not a big man, and sort of how does that sort of affect sort of their approach to the game? Is it almost like playing mind games in a way when they're sort of disrespecting you and daring you to shoot so hard?
I mean, it can be. You can get angry from it. My very first client in the NBA I ever had was as Udonis, and back then Udonis wasn't a shooter. And the very first game or second game of the year, Zach Randolph didn't guard him outside of 5 feet, and it really freaked UD out. And he couldn't make a shot the whole game. More importantly than that, this was not his first year; it was his second year when they got Shaq. They did a lot of high-low action from high post. Udonis is a great passer. There's a reason why he lasted 20 years. He's got a brilliant basketball brain too. So he was an amazing high-low feeder to Shaq, who also was amazing at making those plays. But you can't do it when Zach Randolph wasn't guarding him. Zebo wasn't guarding him, and so you couldn't feed the seal that Shaq would set. And he called me all freaked out about it, and whatever. I said whatever I said, and the next night he had like a career high in Atlanta, who did the exact same thing. But UD had really worked on his shot. I don't know that Scotty has. I don't have any idea what he's been doing. I know he's not making shots well. But I think, and again, I've never met Scotty. We have a mutual friend of my son and the people he coached him in Florida State, but we're not friends. But if I knew him and worked with him, I would be pounding the idea of you've got to get more comfortable in the second box.
Hmm.
You're if they want to drop to the rim, I think he's shooting 32% from 10 to 16 feet. Much of that is from the paint, which is great to get to the paint. He's making 3 and 10. You should be up 5 plus and 10 and draw some fouls. Because he at the rim, he's nearly 70%,
Yeah, yeah.
a little bit worse than last year, but still good. You got to draw those bigs up a little bit, and that opens it up for everybody else. And it's just a matter of practicing. I think he can do it. He's got a floater. He's got a little jumper. I loved it in college. The few times he actually pulled up in the second box, it made me so happy. He just so rarely did it, but I thought he would do it a lot more as a pro. He did as a rookie, and just isn't quite doing it the same. He didn't do it a ton. I think 10% of his shots last year were, basically second box jumpers. This year it's less than 10%. But he doesn't have that same confidence, I don't think. Understandably so. He's not shooting it well,
Hmm.
but that's where you start. To get moving again, to get running, you got to start walking, and to get walking, you got to start crawling. So you got to find ways to make easy shots, make the game easier, not harder, and then you build from there. That's what I always try to do anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And I think that, as compared to launching a lot of threes, which obviously I think a lot of them are just like he's looking for a dribble handoff and the guys aren't open. And then he maybe turns around and he's like, okay, the guy's in the paint. I might as well shoot this three. Like, I do feel like those kind of shots don't really help or even just benefit even the rhythm of the game. Whereas I do think that mid range idea makes a lot more sense. I think, right now, because obviously, look, Nick is trying to be practical, right? Maybe long term, this is not the ideal role for Scotty to play, being sort of at the 5 position, but at the same time, I think he's trying to be practical. Which way can you really get him most productive and most engaged for tomorrow rather than for a month from now or even like next season? And so when you're thinking about Nick and sort of the ways that a coach can use a player like that, or at least attack that kind of coverage, what are the kind of things that the Raptors can call for Scotty in which he can sort of not necessarily score for himself, but just helping the Raptors as a whole score against an aggressive drop coverage like that?
Well, you got to pair him with your best shooter off the move and play him like Clay and Curry does with Draymond and Looney, who don't shoot. Neither of those guys shoot, the big guys. And so if you want to drop on Scotty, he's able to do a handoff action with one of those shooters like Gary Trent, as an
Hmm.
example, and Fred, if Fred was shooting well. And now Scotty's a big, strong guy. He'll set a good screen. Those players will get some separation, getting the ball from Scotty and using that screen on their guy. And if that big is dropping, they're going to be wide open to shoot. So it's why we call at True Hoop, we call the Raptors, I'm sorry, the Warriors offense the Cuisinart. I
Hmm.
don't know what we call the Raptors offense, but it wouldn't be something they'd sell for a lot of money in stores right now. But
It
the
might be the mortar
Cuisinart,
and pestle, man. Just,
yeah, the Cuisinart is a beautiful thing,
uh-huh.
but it really can work because you have to guard the non-shooters or they'll screen you to death for those jumpers from those
Right.
great shooters. And now, so everyone has gravity because of it, right? So Curry's gravity is almost by osmosis connected to Draymond or Kavan's gravity because of the shooting ability he has and their willingness to find, their shooters. So I think you got to do the same thing with Scotty. I'm not saying I don't really watch Toronto very much because they're not relevant. I tend to watch the relevant teams. I just only have one small little brain, and I can't process every single team as well as I need to process the teams that have a chance to actually do something. And right now, Toronto's a long way from showing. Like I watch the Lakers a lot more because I still think there's a possibility there for them. I've been saying that all along, and I look pretty stupid. And then they won 5 in a row, and maybe I still look stupid, but I still think there's a future for them this year. So, but you got to do that. You got to get Scotty as that handoff guy. And then you drain enough jumpers, your teammate does anyway. Now you start lifting that big up.
Hmm.
Well, Scotty now can fake handoff and attack and have a rim that's open. And it opens it up for everyone else either. I mean, no one wants to attack the rim with a 7-footer standing there.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, no, and it's funny you mentioned the Lakers too, because I've just been watching them a bit here and there. Obviously, they're on TV a lot, and I'm looking at Thomas Bryant, and I'm just like, this guy was available, and the Raptors could have probably signed him at center, and would have made a lot of sense. And I'm not saying that would have changed the Raptors season entirely or anything like that, but I like that kid. I think
Well,
he's
you could say that. I would tell you that I think the exact same thing.
yeah.
And There's more than a few teams that just have no vision, or they just, it makes no sense to me, William. I'll just say this: when Klay Thompson and KD and some of these other guys have their devastating injuries, but they're already max players, and then they sign new max deals, even knowing that they still have to have the surgery. Uh, uh, we all understand it because you think they're going to be okay. A guy like Thomas goes down with an ACL tear. He was killing it, scoring 20, getting double. The same thing he's doing now, he was doing for the Wizards, even when Beal was out. Then he has the ACL. He comes back last year. He's just starting to get going, and they traded for Porzingis, understandably so.
Yeah.
KP, they didn't like him in Dallas. So that Thomas, therefore, didn't play much, but it wasn't like anything was wrong with him. And he did have some value. I talked to his agent. They took he has the same agent as Pascal. They took a smaller deal in LA. Number one, Thomas has a home there. Number two, they gambled that he would have kind of a breakout season and all the spotlight that the Lakers drive. And it looked like it was a smart gamble. I mean, I've talked to some teams who have a lot of money to spend on a player like Thomas Bryant, who gives you a double-double almost every night and has some monster games. And he would look very good in a Raptors uniform because he's a paint scorer. He's a defensive rebounding machine, brings a ton of energy. And I think that's what Toronto really is missing is Pascal has to work so hard to get shots for everybody and himself because of the position he plays. To have a guy that's just a bucket getter. I mean, LeBron looks for Thomas Bryant all the time and gets assists because of it. I think Pascal would enjoy having a teammate like that too.
Yeah, I mean, he's averaging 13 and 7. I mean, but my point is, I was just watching him and I was thinking about, I think the Hoop Collective podcast with Brian Windhorst was talking to David McMenamin about just the Lakers, and they were bringing up Thomas Bryant, and I was like, yeah, he has been playing well. And then I looked up his stats for the first time, and he's shooting 67% from the field. And I was like, this guy's making the minimum. Like, I mean, I wonder if like the Raptors, hypothetically, if they took that money that they gave to Otto Porter, which was like the mid-level, and they gave it to him instead. I mean, listen, obviously you can take a gamble in LA, but at the same time, when you're talking about you give him 4 times as much money, and that's not even that much money, you give it to Thomas instead. Anyway, whatever. I'm sure these are kind of micro decisions. Last thing, Coach, I wanted to hear from you is just so Fred VanVleet's also been struggling with the shot, right? That's the other reason why the Raptors have not performed as well. It's actually interesting because I was looking at the stats and like my thinking about it, because you keep getting bombarded with the idea that Fred VanVleet has like one of the worst shooting percentages in the league for a guy who shoots 15 shots a game, and then it kind of sticks with you like, oh, he must have like a horrible true shooting percentage. It is not high, like 52%, like 52.5% is not high. It's below league average, but it's actually not even the worst on the Raptors in terms of just starters alone. Actually, Scottie has a slightly lower true shooting. But I think with Fred, too, is just his three-point percentage just needs to be a lot higher for the Raptors to win, right? Because you have all these forwards, and they create all these advantages, and then you kick out, and the Raptors just haven't been able to make enough of those kickouts. And that's Fred, most importantly, but that's also OG, that's also Gary, that's also other guys on the team who's supposed to be shooting well. When Fred has been asked about this, he sort of talked about how, a role change for him has sort of led to him feeling less rhythm with the ball. And specifically last year, he was the primary ball handler. He made All-Star. And this year, his role changed, essentially. And the team was asking him, essentially, we're going to give Scottie more reps. We're going to have OG more reps. Obviously, Pascal's going to do what he's going to do. So you're going to have to sort of facilitate around that and sort of catch and shoot more. Coach, I do wonder, like, when a player sort of talks about the rhythm in terms of how that affects shots, I think for fans, and myself included, I'm very confused in terms of, like, what that actually means. So can you try to maybe explain a little bit in terms of what rhythm does in terms of impacting shooting percentages?
Oh, yeah. I'm happy to do it. It's something I deal with all the time. I think this quick story will help you a little bit. I was talking to a very, very good guard who starts for one of the better teams in the NBA. And he's used to having the ball in his hands a lot. The way the team is currently playing, it's not in his hands very much. And I told him I noticed in the second half of the game recently, he didn't look that confident dribbling the ball. This guy's maybe not an elite ball handler, but close to elite. He's just young, but he's going to be an elite ball handler. Mm-hmm. And I said, does it just feel weird to you because you touch it so little? And he said, it really does. It feels like I've never dribbled before in my life when I go through such long stretches without a dribble. So I suggested to him at halftime, don't shoot so much, dribble more. I said, even when you come out of games, grab a ball and go in the tunnel and do some dribbling. Whatever you have to do to keep connection. It's weird. A lot of these players, some players, it doesn't matter. And as you get older, you get more comfortable being able to shoot great without any touches. Mike Miller tells a famous story is he would go to Heat practice and he would just sit on the sidelines, watch practice, and then he'd suddenly jump in and immediately get some shots up as part of this practice, go sit back down, dry as hell, come back in 20 minutes later, get a couple shots up in the actual heat of the action, because that's what it looked like in games for him. And so that's really what Fred needs to practice. Some players just have to have that feel, and you've got to recreate that as best you can. And then also you'll see some guys, they want to get that extra shot after the whistle blows, or some guys like to grab the ball before a free throw if they haven't touched it in a while. Some guys just need that biofeedback in a sense of what that ball feels like in their hands, and especially if you're used to it, like Freddie is. So I actually think he'll figure it out. I do. He's not that far away from being where he was last year. It's not like he's an elite shooter. He's a very good shooter. If you look at how Toronto is going to finish the year with a winning record, one of those answers will be, well, Freddie's going to get much better or back to what he was, and it wouldn't surprise me. So I still think he's got a chance at it.
Yeah, no, that's the funny thing with him, because I think, there are other things you can sort of pick at with the players, and I think with Fred too, it's just like he's not an ideal player, right? There are other things that you can sort of immediately say. Obviously, he's shorter, he's smaller. Everybody on the Raptors is a forward, essentially. There's all sorts of stuff. But when you look at his overall numbers, like he's shooting 33% from three this season. His career norm is about 38%. Even if he just gets to that career norm of shooting his 3-point shots, that's going to bring his overall field goal percentage back, around 40, which isn't high, but we know that his role is essentially jack a bunch of threes and, take the occasional layup here or there, or the mid-range jumper. But like, it's actually going to normalize. And the thing that he's also continues to say is that, like, look, my stats are going to look normal at the end of the year. Right now, they're a little down, but even in the last month or so, we're seeing positive signs from him.
Yeah.
I think the thing with him too is just like, thinking long-term in terms of like, who's going to be the point guard here? Obviously, Pascal is going to be a point forward. He's going to have the most touches. Absolutely. I don't think there's a player. I think even if Scottie really took like 2 or 3 leaps in his development, he would still need more to get to where Pascal is. But ultimately, like, who is going to be the number 2 guy on the Raptors if they really get back to being a really competitive team? And is that guy on the roster right now, or are they not? Because if they're not, then of course, then you got to think about making other moves. But I'm curious to think where you are with that, Coach.
There was the year the Boston Celtics won their most recent championship. They had KG, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce, and they all three were asked during the playoffs, who needs to get the winning shot in a big game, and Pierce and KG pointed to Ray Allen, and Ray Allen pointed to Paul Pierce. And in that finals, the final run in the playoffs, each of them was an MVP in one of the series, as I've covered every series for ESPN. Mm-hmm. My point is, it doesn't really matter. You just have to have guys that can do it. Gary Trent can score 30 points in a playoff game. Scotty Barnes, when he's right, can do the same thing. Yep. We know Siakam is. We know Freddie can do it. OG is, I think, coming as a scorer. He's not there yet. I think it's got to be based on what the defense is giving, what you can take, not just what they're giving, but what you can take in terms of matchup. But that all means people are operating on a high level cylinder most games, and as opposed to just one guy, maybe 1.5, if you want to call it, if you think OG's playing, really well offensively. You've got to have all these guys operating, really cooking, so that when a defense says, okay, we can't let Scottie keep scoring in the paint like he did that one game that he forced overtime with that great fourth quarter against I think it was Milwaukee.
Yep.
If he did that every game, he would look like he's the number 2 until you decide to send a second guy down there. He's a great passer. Now someone else is scoring.
Right.
They have they need some more players, and their bench stinks apparently.
It's bad. It's 7 points a game, like on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's terrible. And they need a center, I think. But the pieces are there, and you got to figure out a system offensively. I love what they do in the full court. It's one of my favorite teams for the way they defend and attack everything, and they come at you in waves with their length and athleticism. I think it's a really exciting way to play. It's how I would coach a team typically if I could put a roster like that. But they haven't figured out in the half court, and they need to. There's options. They just got to figure out what to do from the coaches and the players. And then you're going to have an argument as to who the second best player is. And when you have that argument, and there are legit arguments for 2 or 3 guys, well, that's when Toronto is going to be the team I thought they'd be to start the year.
Right. Yeah, you know what? That's a good reminder, too, because they're not that far away. They're just playing really badly. So
Yeah.
if they do keep the team together, that would be the reason why. But Coach, we've taken up a lot of your time, so want to say thank you. And yeah, go subscribe to True Hoop if you haven't already. It's a great little subscription that you can get all of David Thorpe's writing and the podcasts and all the other stuff. The film breakdown, stuff like that. Lots of great content. I really can't recommend it enough.
Thanks, William. Have a good day.
All right, you too. Okay, we're gonna take a quick break. I've been your host Will Lou, and you've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Win Lu. For the second segment, I'm joined by producer and co-host Alex Wong, who I managed to find here at OMP. Just chilling, listening to the show. Where do you listen to the show when you're not actually on the show?
Just in that bunker where we hang out, you know?
No, I mean like what platform? Like
player.sportsnet radio, I believe.
Yeah.
.ca.
That's the OG way, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't. Why you expect me to pull up the YouTube feed?
I used to listen to Jay's talk on that feed, on that little player there.
Yeah, it was cool. I realized I was like 3 minutes behind.
That's why I had to come get you. I literally had to leave the studio during the 5-minute break to find you, but it's all good. Obviously, you know.
Oh man,
you've been prepping. I know you've had a long day already. You and I both did morning radio hits.
Yeah, we did the radio tour for Mr. Rogers.
Yeah. For me personally, I did the morning show with friends of the program, Ailish and Justin.
Yep.
And I woke up at, because look, listen, I work nights, okay? So there's no shame in my game that I wake up later than 8 usually.
He does the 11 p.m. shift at Shoppers or something.
I do.
I work nights. You do
when
work
do you think
nights.
the React Pod gets recorded? When do you think I get home at like 12:30, okay?
That's why I tell you to move downtown, man.
Fair enough.
Show some marks of out.
I do a little farther away. Yeah. But, you know, I set an alarm for like 7:55 to be on the program.
Is that normal for you to wake up at that time?
Yeah, like I usually give myself 10 minutes, you know, wake up, drink some water, like, you know, count to 10, you know, just so the first words I say aren't hello and welcome.
Yeah.
And embarrassingly, my secondary alarm went off.
during
the
the thing?
Yeah,
okay.
So it was tough. And I had to tell them, and Cuthbert and LSU wake up probably, I would assume, latest 5 a.m. each morning.
Yeah, they wake up when I go to sleep. It's wild.
Yeah, so you know, it was a little tough to be like, oh, sorry, that's my morning alarm. I know every time I can't see their reaction, but I just know their reaction is just like,
yeah, it's very
what are you doing?
It's very unprofessional, you know. No, I got a little dilemma too.
You also did the morning.
Yeah, even before that. So you know, I'm taping something for Donovan Bennett's show tomorrow.
Nice.
At 9:30 in the morning.
Yep.
And it's gonna be remote, like from my condo. And I just got a notification that that's going to be the monthly fire alarm inspection, which means it's going to randomly go off between 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So this is the new stress.
That's a
in my
long
life.
window of inspection. My goodness.
Yeah,
they couldn't be like, yo, for 1 hour, we might have to test the alarms. Like, no, for 12 hours.
I got to talk to Mark Savell about my property management because they're also like, oh, garbage chutes may be down for a few weeks on certain floors.
For a few weeks?
Yeah, I'm like, all right.
What are you supposed to do? Take your garbage out on the street?
I gotta just write an expose. Anyways.
Okay. All right,
but yeah, you know, I
homeowner problems.
Talk to JD. Landlord talk.
Oh, buddy.
I was on JD Bunkis's show.
Yeah.
This morning.
Mm-hmm.
It was initially supposed to be at 9. Got bumped to 10. I was thrilled.
Yeah. Nice.
No, it was a good chat. It was a good chat. You know.
What'd you guys talk about?
The Raptors.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I figured.
Just about the trade deadline and the different directions, you know.
Is JD on Team Tank yet?
Oh, he's very heavily.
Heavily?
On the tanking.
Because there's different levels.
He wants to rest the players.
So.
Like rest players and just
is he going to move any of the players or he's just going to rest them? Because that's going to be hard to be like, hey, Pascal, you're having an all-NBA season. Can we rest you?
Well, that's the thing we talked about too. I'm like, how do you approach guys like a Pascal, OG, and even Fred in a contract year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To have those conversations.
Well, at least with Fred, you could be like, listen, we're going to pay you this. We're going to essentially agree, and then you can rest.
We're going to give you that Dennis Schroeder deal, you know? I'm just kidding. He'll be fine.
Yeah.
Fred will be fine. No, I think, and my pushback was, I think, yes, there is the appeal of moving up and getting the top 2 picks that everybody is talking about.
Right.
But you know the Raptors front office and scouting, you know, smartest guys in the room. Like, I think they've probably, this is what I said to JD too, is like, they've probably done their homework or they're still doing their homework, scouting, looking
they're scouting right now.
Right, like looking at.
If you don't see Bobby and Masai around, they're scouting right now.
They're putting together their own draft board.
Their names are. I would love to see the draft board.
And it's possible they look at it like, hey, even if we're in the 5 to 10 range, there's a player there that we really like. So because of that, we don't need to look to just tank and get the full odds, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
this would be consistent with how I think this front office has approached things, although they've never been in this situation. I feel like in this era, which is another thing we talk about.
It depends. It depends if you count Tampa as like an actual season or not. Because in Tampa, it got so bad they lost every game for a whole month.
Yeah, they've never been in a situation where you can look at every key player on the roster and say that there's a reasonable explanation of why you might move them.
Sure.
Which is the position they're in, right? And I almost think it's like a curse of being so kind of well managed that they have every option, right? Like they have all their picks.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
They're in a position where the roster can go either way.
Mm-hmm.
They have a young player in Scotty. They have a franchise guy in Pascal. It's almost like it's too many options.
Yeah.
But I guess it's better than the Lakers just dangling 2 draft picks for 8 months, begging for someone to give them Buddy Hield and Miles Turner.
The funniest thing with that is just like they're essentially saying you can't even scout for the 2029 first round pick.
They're like,
that
there's a
kid
fourth
right now
grader out there.
That kid is like in grade 6 at best right now. You know what I mean? Like, what are you? You're just essentially taking the odds there. I mean, listen, if people want to move in that direction, I think if the front office wants to move in that direction, they got to do more time right now to just scout in terms of like you don't just tank for an arbitrary pick position. You tank for like actual prospects who may be in that range. You need to sort of gather that time right now to sort of see what those guys are. And yeah, man, I mean, this is a key time. This is why I went down and I tried to, tell people like, hey, we need Bobby for the show. And they're like, hey, Bobby's busy with his job. Maybe after post trade deadline, you could get him. And I'm like, yeah, fair enough. He might be a little busy right now.
Maybe on February 10th.
But you know what they've been busy with recently?
Oh, God.
Signing Joe Wieskamp to a 10-day deal.
Oh, yeah, the big wheeze.
The big wheeze.
Yeah.
All right, big
flu
wheezy.
Game. Yeah. Every time he hits a 3, it's a flu game.
So I saw you had this in the rundown.
That's not appropriate in this climate, but
yeah, fair enough. I saw that this was in the rundown, and I was actually really overjoyed because yesterday I happened to be like my partner was coming home late from work, and I was just cooking, and I saw that the options were to watch like I think the Knicks were playing the Bucks or something. I don't know.
That was a good game.
Was it?
Yeah, I didn't even gamble, and I watched.
Because you know what I watched? I went on not even like the main TV networks here. But I went on the like streaming link that the Raptors 905 tweeted out. It's just for free.
Oh, okay.
And I watched the Raptors 905 defeat the
Capital City Go-Go.
That's right? They told the Go-Go
G League
to
teams got great. G League teams got great names, man.
Yeah, I know.
Way better names.
By the way, the 2 coaches in the matchup, because obviously we talked to Eric Corey earlier this season. I think he's like 33-ish. The Go-Go head coach was like 27.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're just redefining like who's going to be a head coach at this point, right?
Yeah.
But I was watching this game mostly to see Joe Wieskamp and see what he's about. And
Joe Wieskamp looks exactly like what you would expect Joe Wieskamp
actually
to look
genuinely exactly what you would expect. Yeah. The guy is wet when it comes to threes. Really, really good. Movement shooting, catch and shoot. The arc of the shot is just very feathery when you watch it.
Are you describing Malachi Flynn right now?
No. Okay. And then when you watch him on defense, I saw this guy got ragdolled like 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
And I'm like, he's not going to play for Nick Nurse.
They did not post those highlights on the team account.
No, but he can really shoot, though. He can really shoot. I don't know if he's actually going to play that much for the Raptors or if this is one of those things where you sign the 10-day, you give him essentially a bonus, go down to the 905. Who knows?
Right.
But ultimately, this is a conversation for Blake Murphy. I just wanted to make you nervous to initiate a Joe Wieskamp
Yeah, I'm always nervous. But I think, I don't know, if the bench is scoring 7 points a night, that's 2 Joe Wieskamp threes plus a free throw. So would it be worth a look?
Did I pronounce his name right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, he would be absolutely the best shooter off the Raptors bench, especially now that Otto Porter is. We'll see if Otto's there tonight. We're gonna go down the arena.
Breaking news. Otto Porter is out tonight. He's on the injury report.
Okay.
Yeah, that's breaking news tonight.
You really do mean breaking.
Oh God. By the way, Matt Devlin was listening in the first segment. And I know you and Coach David Thorpe were talking about Pascal playing at New Mexico State.
Yes.
And you guys didn't know what city he was in. He wanted you to know that it was Las Cruces.
Right, which is just wild because I think he just texted you Las Cruces, no context, nothing.
Yeah, I was like, Matt, was this message for me?
Yeah. And apparently it is. So I looked it up.
Shouts
Las Cruces, New Mexico. Okay, a little geography lesson here. Second biggest city in New Mexico, obviously outside of Albuquerque, which I actually was stuck at one time, coming back from the Raptors winning the championship.
Man, we need the elevator music for
All
this,
right.
man.
Las Cruces has a population of 111,000, which is interesting because New Mexico State, the university itself, has about 11,000 undergrads and 3,000 postgraduates. Okay. And you got to imagine at least 1,000 staffers.
What is this?
So we're talking about like 15,000 people out of 111,000 are just in the university alone. So Pascal, honestly, I want next time I interview Pascal, which I hope is soon. Maybe we make an all-star campaign.
First
we never know.
you interview Pascal.
I interviewed Pascal back in 2018.
I was gonna say, was this at Foot Locker too?
It was not at
this
Foot
guy
Locker,
JR,
man.
the new JR Manhattan, man. He just posted up at Foot Locker and
No, JR was in the front.
and
I was in
just
the back.
waited for Raptors players to release shoes there.
That's not what happened.
And
But
then I was like, Fred, who would be your 3-on-3 team?
that was a great. It was a great segment, man. Look it up.
I know.
Me
Prime
and Fred drafted
Yahoo years, man.
Yeah.
Prime Yahoo years.
My team was way better, by the way. My team was way better. I gotta say. I had Pascal. I had Serge. I had Kyle.
Nice. Once again, couldn't get to the Pacers paying a fan $500, but we'll save that for tomorrow.
What would you pay?
That's
what's the
that's
worst
a
thing you
longer
paid
discussion.
$500 for?
That's a longer discussion.
What's the generational wealth report on $500?
I don't know. Generational wealth nephews are at the game again tonight. So
are you gonna do the same treatment?
No, because they're going with their basketball team. So I think they're gonna get to actually watch near courtside before the game. And then they're doing some kind of anthem buddies thing. So they're standing in front of the players during the anthem.
Okay, so
so if anyone sees my nephews, courtside again,
what do they look like?
For PR, it was not me. Like I'm not involved. Now that I realize they're taking attendance.
They go take attendance on your family courtside.
And now it's time for Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game. Oh wow, Toronto Raptors back-to-back home games against the Charlotte Hornets this week. Everybody calm down. No need to get to the arena 4 hours early here. The line for tonight. I'm not.
I'm taking my grandma to see an audio specialist before the game.
Oh, okay. The line for tonight's game, the Raptors are hosting the Hornets. The Raptors are 8-point favorites at home. The Hornets are one of the few teams with a worse record than the Raptors in the East, 11-30 on the season. They're 6-16 on the road. Kelly Oubre Jr. is out. Gordon Hayward is doubtful. Do you know something that the Hornets and the Raptors have in common? Neither of them have won more than 2 games in a row all season.
Come on, man.
I just want to put this Raptors season in context. That's all. Yeah. So Raptors -8.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm gonna have to say that. I'm gonna take the Raptors, but I mean. It's hard to just like confidently pick them. I mean, look, listen, even just like on a matchup basis, I think the Raptors would do really well to guard this team. They have a lot of good pieces for it. Last year, I thought the Raptors actually had a really good game against Charlotte when they played their big wings. And they really switched and shut down a lot of Charlotte's pick and roll actions. Obviously, they play a lot through their guards. And they were able to even impose their will and play a lot in transition because this is also a team that can get a little sloppy. The Raptors are obviously a team that can get up and down in transition. So, the Raptors are either going to disappoint you a lot and drop a close game, or they're probably going to blow this team out.
Okay.
And I do think that they're closer to the latter. So I would take
the
Raptors
-8. That was Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game. Breaking news for real.
Okay.
The Raptors say Otto Porter Jr. has undergone season-ending surgery on his left foot.
That's
per Mark Stein.
Yeah. I mean,
wow, my breaking news was 10 minutes early.
Yo, listen, watch back on the show. You actually broke this in real time because our producer was desperately in our ear being like, Otto Porter's out.
Shouts to Derek Brandeo. Yeah. That's our Woj right there.
That's too bad. The signing didn't work out.
Jennifer Rolnick is our Shams. Yeah.
So do you think we can get a second-round pick from him at the deadline or no?
Second-round pick.
He has a player
in
option
the G League? Yeah.
No, come on.
He has a player option?
He has a player option.
How many options has he been given this season?
Well,
oh, man. I got to delete that tweet where I said Otto Porter might be the best free agency signing the Raptors have ever had.
No, this is really Jared Sullinger 2.0. You remember Jared Sullinger?
Oh, yeah, I remember the scooter.
Yeah. I wonder who played more games between these two guys.
Oh, man. So Otto Porter.
Listen, it's too bad. It would have worked out, but it's too bad. Yeah. I guess we'll see.
We'll discuss it more tomorrow.
If he's around. But that does it for us today. I've been your host, Will Lou, and you've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find The Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts. And subscribe, and please rate and review the show. Reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360, Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Thanks again to producer and co-host Alex Wong. Thanks to David Thorpe. Thanks to our board producer, Derek Brandale, and Jennifer Rolnick for helping us with the Otto Porter scoop. And we'll talk to you tomorrow.